Okay, we are live 3/3/2025. This would be the 34th anniversary of the beating of Rodney King, which I contend was directed by James Cameron. And there's a backstory to it if you're familiar with the George Holliday, the man who filmed the beating, after he was done filming some behind the scenes stuff at Terminator 2 about an evil cop, cop turned villain, kind of a paradigm shift. And what was the main story with the Rodney King beating? That's right, villainous cops. All right, we're joined by Roxy, Josh Lebsock, Kevin Mooring, Let's Go, Ears Up, Rocco Calzone says aloha, Diana South, Thirst for Truth, and Frugal Snowbird. Thank you for joining. By the way, I'm going to release the South Pole episode tonight to members and to maybe even the public. The responses so far have been pretty good, and I'm just kind of curious to see is what the demand is for a follow-up episode. We already have much of it written as it is. All right, let's just wait a few minutes for the raft to assemble. I think I had a title for tonight's live stream. I've been focusing on March 4th. Oh, that's right. Tell it like it is. Donald Trump truthed, tell it like it is, referring to tomorrow. He said tomorrow as in 3/4. So what's the big deal with March 4th? Well, March 4th, you have 50 protests, 50 states against Trump and Musk. So it's a major protest date. It's also Fat Tuesday. And New Orleans had that terror attack during some outdoor event recently. So there's some kind of build up for tomorrow. And then Trump comes out and he says, and I actually have this post here, tomorrow night will be big. I will tell it like it is. Now, is it a bluff? He said it in all caps, but he's been using all caps for so long that it kind of loses its meaning. Norba says your Twitch stream is like 8 seconds behind your Twitter. Interesting. That's Twitch. I just use Twitch as a backup. It's an archive, but I don't really care for it. I used to. We had a nonstop 24/7 stream on Twitch from 2018 to 2022. And then they pulled it one day. I don't know what it was we said. And even now, they're making people delete their archives. They're only letting store so much content. So I'm kind of over these platforms. They're all compromised anyway. Yes, Fat Tuesday, King Cake, Mardi Gras, which, of course, Tuesday is, again, March 4th, the anniversary of the date that the Boston bomber, Joker, Sarnev, had his death penalty reinstated. That was the same day the Batman movie came out. And so there might be some significance to it, but look, 50 protests, 50 states, every capital. So if you're close to your state capital, you could go join. I don't know. I considered trying out this Antifa outfit. I would go Antifa before Proud Boys, but I'm not really a protester. I think they're both ridiculous. It's almost the same thing. Tell me if there's a difference. I mean, it's a distinction without a difference. Soy Boy versus Proud Boy. Which is it? And the reason I say Antifa is that they don't actually get punished for anything. The system supports them and calls them peaceful protesters. I mean, that's clever. Label yourselves peaceful protesters. And then the patriots are treated like terrorists. Everything's just inverted, and they seem to have figured this out. And by the way, this is also part of the madness. So in the madness, you had a group of people described as Antifa on meth with Uzis. And they were rising up in response to a government that had been seized by fascists, by a billionaire who funded Nazis online and stole the election. So obviously it's about Musk. It's about Trump. The madness is about MAGA extremism. And they made heroes, almost like Robin Hood and his merry men out in the forest. That's how these armed Antifa with their ghost guns were depicted. And that's how Luigi has been depicted. Righteous, class warrior, Robin Hood, even had the green, forest green hoodie. But, like this scenario here, it's basically a class warfare hero, and it's seen as justifiable. Like, these are the good guys. And so Antifa going out, or not Antifa, but the left in general, protesting tomorrow is pretty much an example of them following Netflix. They're protesting against the billionaire, against Trump. Violet Pangon says they're making them believe they rigged elections. Well, that was the thing. And I talked about this right after I watched that show about the time of the Luigi shooting. I said one of the points they've made in the show is that the election was stolen. That it was stolen by the guy with access to all the computers, the tech billionaire. And of course, one of the other things about it was the assassination. Not just of the tech billionaire, but of the right-wing Nazis. And this is something lauded by the community. So, for example, the main character, who's based on Don Lemon, I think, he kills someone who's based on Nick Fuentes and possibly even Stu Peters. Brother 14. Leader of the Forge, which is like America First. Well, this Don Lemon guy is framed for killing this right-wing extremist, but he's treated as a hero. There's a Lauren Jennings, who's based on Laura Loomer. She gets killed with a nerve agent designed to simulate a heart attack. I mean, if you haven't seen the madness, we're seeing it unfold. Fireflies on the moon. Oh, yeah, I just saw the firefly photo of the sunrise. And what always strikes me first when I see all this lunar photography and lunar video, I find myself asking, where is the moon? It looks, and they say, okay, on this picture here, it's described as gorgeous. A gorgeous shot of the sunrise on the moon. It looks like a car with its headlight on, just like from across the street. It's not all that gorgeous. It's not even a great picture. And I'm not trying to be hypercritical, but where the hell is the moon? I don't see a horizon line. It looks like a parking lot. It's too small. If this was really a quarter the size of the Earth, and you're looking at a camera lens 5 or 6 feet above the surface, you would see miles of lunar landscape. Miles. Sorry for the Roman salute there. But I'm just trying to point out that you would... what's funny is, I think Eric Dubay used to say that Hitler's arm gesture was a reference to the flat Earth. I mean, as ridiculous as that is. Just some little bit of trivia. By the way, we talked about this yesterday at the end. Robbie Davidson has said, "Rip flat Earth." He put a tombstone up, and he said he's no longer part of it. He was wrong, he says, and I think that's funny. That it's like, well, his whole premise was the Bible, so now I don't know. It's a conundrum. We talked about him and his shady connections and his shady behavior, and why it's kind of fallacious to think that just because your straw man model has been falsified, you must therefore default to the standard model. Like that's never been a fallacy we've fallen for, either or. It's like, no, it's too easy. They walked into that one. I have no sympathy for the shape traders. And I'm a shape agnostic. And at this point, I'm even shape ambivalent. Like, I don't care. But the people who took a side and grabbed onto a model, and now they're having to betray their belief, it's like, well, that's what you get for adopting a belief system. Looks like you could just reach out and touch it, says Braveheart. Oh, yes. Yes, it does, doesn't it? Like those distant craters. It looks like you could reach out and touch them, but they're right there. Now, if you don't know what that's a reference to, it's a reference to a lot of these individuals in Antarctica were just looking around talking about how the mountains and glaciers were miles away, but they looked like they could just be touched, like they were rear screen projection. And I'm not saying that they faked the final experiment, but the idea has been floated. Norba says flat Earth is old. Well, I don't think anybody really cares. Like, the only people talking about it now are mixed martial arts. And those guys are all pushing AE, single polar map with a dome from the Bible. Like, none of these individuals are really that profound or deep about it. It just seems like a talking point they've been fed. And maybe it's because they want to associate questioning cosmology with toxic masculinity and Nazi ideology. It seems like that's one of their MOs. All right, let's see here. Boosting stream, thank you for joining from Kick. Are there any real people from Kick, or is it all bots? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I've been accused of bot farming. There are people who say that there's only like 33 people here, and the rest of them are bots. Okay, so take a look at this picture again. Sunrise on the moon as seen by Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander. Posted on 3/3. So if you're looking at the screen, it looks like a small parking lot. It doesn't look like a moonscape to me. I'm not really impressed. But anyway, it says the spacecraft is getting to work starting up its science payloads and capturing amazing images of the distant Earth from the lunar surface. This is just kind of a take that flat earthers thing. And to me, it's not even about the shape. It's really about fake space. And that's the main thing to talk about here. Like, I would say that space itself is really, one, it's a new iteration of heaven or paradise. It's a religion for the masses. It's a heaven that even the atheists will believe in. But I also think it's just kind of a metaphor for the space between our ears, which they control through world view warfare, which is primarily conducted through the media. 33-year-old says, this stream is being played as a lullaby for a young child. Let's see how it works. Well, unlike mainstream media, they're not going to be subconsciously programmed. This isn't MK Ultra. And I think MK Ultra exists, but I don't think it's what people think it is. It's not Clockwork Orange, where they pry the person's eyes open and they force him to consume all kinds of crazy media and give him all kinds of subliminal commands, and later they lose all autonomy when they get triggered into an alternate personality. The MK Ultra works in a far more subtle way, and I think it works through getting people to agree with things. I mean, take, for example, who still talks about 1984 like it's a hypothetical situation that we should avoid? It's like we're way past that. And they sold it to people as a lifestyle. Total surveillance, inside and out. Thought reading capabilities of social media has just made it unnecessary for any kind of inquisition. And the ubiquitous cell phone and smartphone, live streaming, TikTok, everybody's filming everybody and themselves. And it's rewarded. You can commodify. Privacy is a thing of the past. A fight or flight's not a thing anymore. Now it's record or, well, just record. I mean, there isn't any response other than just be a spectator. But this is like 1984. But it didn't require the government taking over and forcing people to endure something torturous. They made it fun. Okay, let's continue. Lloyd Miller says, AI should be able to do great moonscapes and direct perfect fake staging. Exactly. They shouldn't still be working out of some airplane hangar. I think they do it at like Fort Canyon, New Mexico. There's some place where it's believed Apollo 11 was faked. I don't know where they faked Antarctica for the final experiment. Just kidding, right? Anyway, look, I'm just needling that issue because it was a valid question. Was it fakeable? Is it fakeable? We need to talk about these things. And it shouldn't have been so divisive. And for some reason, it's just like the question, it's become like the next Apollo 11, like now attacking the conspiracy theorists, but it's being attacked from within. So if you're a conspiracy theorist, your former conspiracy theorist friends are now against you. It's like, no, you have to let people be skeptical and let them arrive at their own conclusions. There's no deadline for this. Oh, you didn't come back to the ball right after the final experiment, so therefore we can't be friends. Like, no, I'm sorry. I give you some time. Like, I'm saying, I'm not planning on asserting a total understanding of the world. Not this year, maybe next year. Lloyd Miller says the Ukraine war may be playing out the 1984 creation of Eurasia. Yeah, I saw them ripping on Zelensky for not wearing a suit. I'm sick of his costume. That's all it is. It always has been. All this, it's all been the theater of Psywar. It's never been more clear, more unserious. I mean, like something like 30,000 of the most popular videos having, pertaining to the Russia-Ukraine conflict were clips from video games, misconstrued as real. Oh, by the way, let's go into the points of interest. A couple of things. Kate Perry's going to space. And this is interesting because back in, what was it, in like August, I think, she was performing at some event. And it was a song called Walking on Air. It was at the iTunes Festival. And I was just describing how if you look at the video, she's walking on air. And her movements are, I think, more graceful, but they're equivalent to what you see in the space station. It looks like she's levitating. And aside from the wires, which they can get rid of real time now. But I was watching this and I was just thinking about how we are debating how in the ISS, everything we see up there could be replicated on the Earth. And I had some people trying to argue that some of the things they do on the space station couldn't be done on Earth, which I think is preposterous. Anyhow, it's interesting to note that Kate Perry is literally going to space now. Blue Origin says its next flight will make history with Kate Perry, Lauren Sanchez, which is Jeff Bezos' wife, and Gayle King, an all-woman crew on the New Shepard. And they're taking flight this spring. They said it's the first all-woman flight since Soviet Union's Valentina Tereshkova's solo spaceflight in 1963. So Kate Perry's going to space. And one of the reasons why I noted Kate Perry is that she had this eye glitch that went viral. So if you see the picture here, and a lot of anti-vaxxers said this was evidence that Vaxageddon was happening and that everybody's going to glitch out, that this was a symptom of it. And it turns out that no, this is actually part of an act. She's playing this malfunctioning robot. But anyway, at the time, she said, "To all my flat earthers and spaces fakers and birds aren't realers, come see my broken doll eye party trick in real life." So it's a party trick. But she addressed us as spaces fakers, as flat earthers, which is kind of a weird thing to start with because, no, it was anti-vaxxers. And then she said some pretty gross stuff about beer pouring out of certain body parts. But anyway, that's Kate Perry. She's going to space very soon. It's official. Psyopsicles here in Gilded said, they've officially jumped the shark. Oprah's wife is going to space with BZ and Kate Perry. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. They jumped the shark. They've been reduced to parlor tricks. Did you see Don Petite jumping? Don Petite's in his underwear in the space station, and then he has his pants there. And he jumps into the pants. And we're supposed to clap like seals. It's like, that's not impressive. I mean, it might impress children, but special effects wise, it was garbage. It looks worse than my animations with South Pole. Yes, Mango, we will be on earlier. I'm aiming for 6 most days. Oh, by the way, tonight we're going to be cutting it a little early, probably about after about an hour and 15, hour and a half. But I'm going to be live again, and I will be painting Luigi. And 10% of the auction is going to go to his commissary. Now, I hate to do this, but I don't believe it's real, so I'm justified in doing it. And I did see some people selling Luigi merchandise on various websites, t-shirts. One t-shirt person I follow sold 250 t-shirts with Saint Luigi on the cover. And I thought, okay, and I think the selling point was he promised to send part of it to Luigi. So I'm thinking as a test, and I talked about this the other day, and I've been waiting to find the right picture and I got the right background. I'm thinking I'm going to do a live painting of Luigi, probably the Saint Luigi, and I'll auction it off. And then I will specify that a portion of it is going to go to his commissary. All right, let's see here. Verkjan says the spaceship's going to explode or something and they're all going to die, but it won't be real, so Katie can go live in the other lands beyond the map. You know you've made it when you go to space, though, because when you go to space, you're at this capstone level of the pyramid. And so this will be interesting, honestly. I mean, consider this. This will rule out any possibility that she has plausible deniability regarding information about how fake things are. Like, you have to be really high up in the PSYOP entertainment complex to go to fake space. You can take part in any number of PSYOPs, controlled demolitions, fake shootings, you can be a crisis actor, but faking space is next level. Celebrities that go there are privy to something. That's high security clearance. I mean, it's not like they could fake it without her knowing. That's just outside the realm of possibility. So you can kind of look at the space program if you want to figure out who's in the know, who has a high security clearance, who's capstone level. That's an indicator. And I've even talked about the symbolism of the capsule as it relates to the capstone, or the capstone at the top of the obelisk, or the capstone at the top of the pyramid, representing the heroic elite, the elevated. And I think the capsule is specifically a representation of this. Thrustazar said, how horrible is she that Russell Brand had to walk? Not sure what you mean, but I do remember they got married. And Russell Brand is now really pushing, he's kind of this Charles Manson-esque Jesus type. I saw him talking about something and holding a knife, ranting about the sword of Damascus and sacrifice. I wouldn't want to be isolated, like on a ranch somewhere, or an island with that individual. T-Dog135 says, I won't have you mocking the wonderful South Pole animation 2.5D for life. Oh yeah, no, South Pole is back. And again, if you haven't seen the pilot for this next season, it's going to be made available here very soon. So just make sure you're subscribed. I mean, the whole point of it is to be funny. You know, it's all done in good spirits. We're not trying to be cruel about anything. For example, poking fun at Ye's helium addiction. That's not funny. But in this context, it kind of is. But I'll let the viewers be the judge of it. We'll take suggestions, script ideas. We always want input, animators. And if you do join in, if you do get into our Discord server, we will share all the inside information as far as what kind of software we're using. Text prompts, voice generators, and everything. Okay, Norba, Russell Brand is blackmailed probably. Well, the allegations against him are pretty hideous all around. And it seems like he was enabled. And it almost looks like he's adopting the posture of having converted to Christianity to maybe soften his image before something drops. Like he's acting like he's converted, but in a very culty way, very overblown, and he's just an actor in my view. Yeah, tonight is 3/3 anniversary of the Rodney King beating. I think the George Floyd Act was passed on this date. We've talked about this date and its significance a few times, but another thing too is tomorrow. Tomorrow is the big one. 50 states, 50 protests, Mardi Gras, and Trump says, quote, tomorrow night will be big. I will tell it like it is. Bach Precision, member for 6 months, level Blue Wrench Lodge. Okay, so if you're in Blue Wrench Lodge, you'll certainly be given a notification tonight when South Pole is released. So let's go over the points of interest. If something piques your interest, I will follow up on it. Casey Anthony is now a legal advocate on TikTok. Who was the other one that just came out recently? Tanya Harding. So a lot of these tabloid celebrities are cashing in on their fame through Substack. David Weiss doxed 33,000 people. Yeah, that's insane. And that's 100% true. Let me go ahead and get into that here too. 34 years after Rodney King beating, culture of police brutality. Captain America. Now, this is something we talked about last night. Shout out to Jurassic Liars. When Captain America's trailer came out, it had a scene where the president is in a theater and he gets shot at and the glass around him breaks and he falls to the ground. Marvel changed the trailer because of how closely it approximated what happened on 7/13/2024. So that's the premiere of the trailer, and then it follows real life. Well, now the movie's premiering in Liberty Theater in Washington, and the ceiling collapses. So you have like a parallel event, but Liberty, the ceiling, and a theater, which is where the shooting happened, and in Washington. So there's some connections here. Firefly's Ghostlander took a photo of the Earth, looks fake to me. And it does look fake to me. I mean, you can't cure that. It looks fake to me. Ariana Grande at a memory erasure clinic. Now, I've never heard of these, but apparently she had memories erased. There's a clinic you can go to. It's a real thing. It's like that movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Season 1, Episode 13 of The Brady Bunch. So let me go ahead and just let you fill this in. We have been noticing that many movies have specific references to future psyops in their release dates, the season number, the episode number. For example, Colony, Season 3, Episode 11, Seattle, Ground Zero for the reboot of Civilization. Aliens take over, you never see them, but the governments capitulate. But Seattle's where it all reboots, is what they say. So they have a great reset. So again, Seattle's where the pandemic started on 3/11. So Season 3, Episode 11. So we talk about this a bit. There is the episode of The Office 10 years prior to the pandemic, and it had a number of correlations to the pandemic itself. So here's what I wanted to see if you can guess. Season 1, Episode 13 of The Brady Bunch, 1969. Any guess as to what the theme is? 113, what is the theme of a Brady Bunch episode? And it's a controversial one, which is why I noticed it. Deprogram Truther says Blink Twice movie had memory erasing. Yes. Yeah, that movie had some interesting subtexts to it as well, and it referenced, I think, the Diddy thing. But yeah, the memory erasure was a huge part of it. Okay, so to answer this one, the episode 13, season 1 of The Brady Bunch is an episode about measles, a measles outbreak, and anti-vaxxers were using it to suggest that the measles were essentially harmless. But it was kind of controversial because how it was used and how it was politically used. But I'm just noticing here, it's just another one of these. We have a number of TV shows we can point at where it's 113, 311, and they're always correlated in the very same way. Angst G says, will you be incorporated the coming journey of Lauren Sanchez, Gail King, and Kate Perry on the Bezos? Yeah, the Dong rocket. Yes, we'll have to do that. In fact, that's got to be also, I guess we should also include Tom Cruise. Yeah, that's got to be one of our future episodes. Maybe the next one. That's one of our whole approaches with South Pole is we're writing predictive programming and concurrent programming into our episodes, knowing what is being planned based on actual state-sponsored predictive programming. So we're kind of getting into the game in a way. Yeah, Brady Bunch, everybody's sick. There's even comments about everybody getting sick, kind of a pandemic reference. But also 1969. And one of the things that we noted that was strongly correlated were the years 1968, 1969 to 2020, 2021. Like they recycled most of the major news cycles. That's when I coined the term metascript. And by the way, the book Metascript Decoded, which I want to rewrite it, but the original manuscripts disappeared from my hard drives. It is now an audiobook. So Audible has this program, and I'm a beta tester. If you have an ebook up, they give you a selection of AI narrators. You just pick one. 5 seconds later, there's a book for sale. And at first, I tried it out, and I thought it was kind of rudimentary. You could tell it was a computer. But every few months, I get an update, and they said, hey, we've updated our voices. And they keep improving and improving, and they're getting pretty good. So Metascript Decoded is available as an audiobook. And that's where I kind of lay out the big picture. That's where I kind of originally started to use the phrase metascript to describe what appeared to be the proactive bending of history according to a prefabricated template. And I want to update the book, having since, expanded our understanding of this and news bending itself. The true purpose of fake news, which eludes a lot of people, truthers, etc. Truthers are thinking they're having victories against the mainstream media. It's like, sorry, alt media and mainstream are two sides of the same coin. Always have been. Yeah, Brady Bunch, everyone's sick. But that was, again, this is just one of these things let me pull this up. You'll see what I'm talking about. If you want to follow me on X, it's IPS Think Tank. Okay, so I was looking at this post by Foundering. The Brady Bunch, Season 1, Episode 13, Is There a Doctor in the House? The full banned measles episode. It was removed from all streaming services in 2019. They treated measles very differently in this, and Big Pharma had to memory hole this era. So the premise of the tweet here is that a year before the pandemic, this episode from the Brady Bunch, which showed the measles as not such a big deal, was scrubbed. And then later anti-vaxxers used it because it was very supportive of the idea that measles was essentially harmless. Remember when the measles was a punchline in the Brady Bunch? Fascinating. 2019 was also the year this movie came out called, I think it was called 6 Feet. Maybe it was 5 Feet Apart. It was about these two immunocompromised lovers who had to stay 6 feet apart. And I think they called it 5 feet apart because he kept transgressing. But it came out in 2019. You should narrate your own book, says Roxy. Well, one of the reasons why I've always just outsourced is that when you have a separate person reading your book, that's a separate person actively promoting it. And if you're sharing royalties, you tend to make more in the aggregate. So I've found it useful in the past. But in the future, I would consider it. P. Trippa says, sickness equals usually dehydrated or constipated. Once we start understanding the lymph system, we'll never become sick. Violet Pangon says, Alex Jones talked about this a lot. Oh, this is interesting. Mango says, Future World, the sequel to Westworld, released 8/13/76, is playing now. We talked about Westworld quite a bit. There's a lot there that corresponded to the whole 2020 event. Lots of concurrent programming. And I have many examples of it. In fact, I put one example in Insider issue number 1 that had to do with a show called 3%, about this future dystopian civilization where 3% of the population get to live in this modern world, and the rest have to stay out, in this poverty-stricken, unsanitary kind of, I guess it was post-apocalyptic scenario. But in order to join the 3%, you had to be sterilized. And the people who were part of this club had like a patch on their shoulder or a hole in their shirt where you could see their pokey scar because the pokey, well, it sterilized them. And this was one of the fears of the vaxophobes back in 2020. They said, nobody's having babies anymore. Everybody's going to die. Now, of course, that never happened. But anyway, we were looking at this show called 3%. And one of the things about the predictive programming is a lot of it is in symbolism. Not just symbolism, but like it's in the art. It's in the subtext, but a lot of it's just purely visual. So here's an example, though, of a little bit of predictive programming, concurrent programming, and symbolism in plain sight. And this is similar to the stuff we saw with Westworld. But so the 3% logo, it's just the number 3 and a percentage sign. But if you look at it 90 degrees counterclockwise or turn your head, you're seeing the Twin Towers. And so it also creates the number 11. So you kind of have a 311 and Twin Towers. And the percentage sign looks like the Twin Towers as seen from the bird's eye view. And what we find is there's a consistent pattern of 9/11 and 3/11 overlap when it comes to predictive programming. Movies that foreshadow one tend to foreshadow the other. And we have many examples of this. Vanilla Sky, for example, 9/11 predictive programming, but also 3/11 stuff. And you wouldn't have known until after these events. And people who decode Kubrick will talk about how, oh, he was referencing Apollo 11 in The Shining. But after 9/11, it became clear to those who are looking at his movie closely, he was foreshadowing 9/11 as well. It just hadn't happened yet. And the people who look at Kubrick as having blown the whistle on Apollo 11 don't notice that the same movie was talking about events that hadn't happened yet. But it was doing so in symbolism. It was doing so in the cinematography and the way that they put images in certain contexts. All right, going through your comments. How many do we have here in chat today? So tomorrow's a big deal. I know today's 3/3. So the Masons are probably all... Oh, you know what? There was something on 3/3. No, was that 3:30? I guess it was 3:30. I'm thinking of the individual. His name was... what was the name of the... It was a really bizarre name. There's some guy who went out in Canada burning Masonic temples. And I think his name was Coleman. Orion. Benjamin Coleman. Man who set fire to 3 Masonic temples. And I think this was on March 3rd. And one of the reasons he said for doing so, it was on March 30th. And one of his reasons for burning the Masonic temples is he wanted to draw attention to their use of the number 33 in all of their psyops. I mean, this guy sounded like a plant specifically intended to make people like us look crazy. March 30th, 3 Masonic temples burned. I mean, I'm sure this was an inside job. I'm like 100% sure of it, actually. In fact, I think this guy even spent time with this flat earth guy called... I got to double check this. But I don't know. I have to double check it because this Benjamin Coleman, whose middle name was like Orion Carlson. Benjamin Orion Carlson Coleman. But I'm pretty sure he was friends with this Canadian Flat Earth channel. But I want to double check. Sounds like insurance fraud to me, says Kudo Core. Right. Well, anyway, I just sort of brought this up because the dates, and we just been kind of noticing these dates. It's almost predictable. We more or less predicted this one. But it looks like a self-inflicted wound. You know, cults will do this type of stuff to diffuse critics. Scientology does it all the time. Every once in a while, somebody with a samurai sword will attack their org and the security guard out there in Los Angeles. And then it makes all of their critics look like crazy people. Truth hurts. Yeah, I'm thinking it might be the Canadian Vapor, but I'm not sure. Yeah, the Canadian Vapor. This was just one of the Flat Earth channels, Mac Parhar, who I'm pretty sure spent time with Benjamin Coleman before the guy burned the temples down. I had to check my mind maps because it matters. It's not just guilt by association. There is a network of individuals, operatives, who are doing some type of work. I mean, here's an example. Let's go back to David Weiss. And this was posted by Mick Toon. David Weiss has exposed thousands of users' private data, and he's done nothing to resolve it. It's still insecured. Passwords are stored in the clear. He claims it's fixed, but it's not. He attacks those who shine a light on his lies. So here's what is from haveibeenowned.com. The Flat Earth Sun Moon Zodiac Map. In October 2024, the Flat Earth Dave app was found to be leaking extensive personal information of its users. Now, I first heard about this from Jaronism, who said that his home address was leaked, and now pictures of his house are all over the internet. But listen to this. The data includes 33,000 unique email addresses along with usernames, latitude and longitude on the globe, and passwords are stored in plain text. A number of profiles also contain birth dates and genders. And also, Witsit Gets It. Witsit Gets It had his crypto. Apparently, his Coinbase username, email, and password were the same as for his Flat Earth Dave Sun Moon Zodiac app. And whoever accessed Witsit Gets It's information got his crypto and stole it. So that's a problem. Now, wasn't he raising money for something to audit NASA, and then somebody needs to audit Witsit? I was like, where did all that money go? But it's starting to kind of add up here. So the breach date was 15 October 2024. 33,294 accounts have been compromised. This means that if you have that app, your date of birth, your email addresses, your gender, your geographic location, names, usernames have all been leaked. And I heard Jaron talking about this, and he warned Dave about it multiple times, and it sounds like Dave is only concerned about the monthly revenue from all the people who are using his Flat Earth Zodiac Sun Moon Watch Clock Compass Calendar app or whatever. I mean, what do you use it for? What are they actually staring at when they're looking at this thing? Like, okay, there's the sun. Let me orient myself. Like, I mean, it's functionally useless. And what people are paying money for videos that claim that hobby rockets are hitting the dome. It's like, no, the parachute's popping out. Kidcore says, Dearth doesn't understand why encryption is important. Uh-oh. I wouldn't admit that if you have the app. I don't know. I mean, I understand apps. I'm not knocking the app, but he's had a lot of time to resolve this, and it's a single pole sun rotation map that's invalidated by the final experiment. So it needs to be fixed. Deprogram Truther said, I would need to see some proof of that, the crypto theft. Yeah, Witsit Gets It. You don't just trust him? Okay, I don't know. I'm not trying to be critical of the app, but I mean, I've heard about this for months, and I think something should be done. Actually, I have been critical of the map for a long time, of this app for a long time, because the original person who created this one was Zoom Truth. He created the app. Dave Weiss was a beta tester. And as a beta tester, he was allowed to basically use it and try it out. And then this is someone from Globebusters and his son. Globebusters, a couple of individuals there, hacked the account. They hacked the app, and they said it was terrible. So basically, they talked people out of using Zoom Truth's app. But Dearth then created an app that seemed exactly like the one he was beta testing. So I'm like, that's interesting. Isn't that intellectual property theft? You can't beta test an app and then publish it yourself after helping to slander the original app. So from the very beginning, I think it's been kind of shady. And I wondered, are they not just data harvesting, and perhaps maybe these shills get a bit of an incentive, like they get paid for every person that they identify that fits within a certain demographic. I mean, talk about like market research. We have the geolocation of every single person who doesn't believe in the moon landing, all in one app. Here's all their information. It might be useful to somebody, especially when you look at how target marketing applies to psyops today. Like, I would say that the final experiment was largely a psychological operation, and I think it was targeted at NASA critics, media critics. And you'll notice, though, that they never talk about media fakery writ large. The fake events are real to them. I'm pretty sure that, and he can correct me, I'm pretty sure that Jeranism thinks January 6th was real and that Trump was really shot. So these people are 1 foot in the matrix, 1 foot out, which is not a logical place to be. It suggests, I would say, mendacity. So here's Blue Ghost landing on the moon. Looks fake to me. Down in South says, my first sell was $19.99. Never before bought an app. I did it out of curiosity. It didn't work. Used my compass, measured where the sun was. Well, I think it's a great idea. And I think it was a great idea, or could have been a good idea. But the fact is, it's the problem I have is philosophical. Like, it's premature to have a model, but you haven't quite debunked it as the best explanation yet. The best you can do is say, I'm refusing to conclude this pending further information. And then it's up to you to decide when you have enough information. What constitutes a shill, says P. Trippa? Somebody covertly working for the government. Somebody working to infiltrate from the bottom up organic communities and ensure top-down control through influencers down below. And we have examples of this. The Flat Earth conferences is run by feds and peds. I mean, I hate to say it, but it was people who are compromised, people who are deliberately planted there for the purposes of control. So it's not like a myth. It's not like shills don't exist. You know, it's not even a debate. We're talking about infiltration, co-opting of culture, think tanks being infiltrated by spies, by intelligence, limited hangout operations. You know, I would argue that most conspiracy theories are limited hangout operations, and they're designed to lead people in circles. They're designed to prevent people from arriving at the truth. Alex Jones has to be, in my view, one such individual. But the word shill is kind of misused. A shill would specifically refer to people, maybe crisis actors, who are paid to kind of like, astroturf the numbers. But a better term is controlled opposition or agents. It's not even a question. And moreover, even if you're not an agent getting paid for it, you're a de facto agent. You're a de facto controlled opposition, and you're a de facto crisis actor if you still adhere to alt media narratives. You're just one of them. The purity of your heart and intentions don't matter. You can be pure-hearted, you can be a truther, but if you're bouncing off the same teleprompted messaging, you're regurgitating alt media claptrap, you're just a propaganda mule. And it's kind of naive at this point, in my view, to pretend like alt media isn't 100% compromised. So shills or not, whether or not you can identify specific shills is immaterial. It is a shill-saturated environment, and it is specifically guardrailed and upheld by individuals who I think are at various levels of complicity. Buzzing Fret says Skiba. Oh, Rob Skiba. I don't like to speak ill of the fake dead or real dead. I don't know. But he did do a 6-part documentary with Philip Stallings and Robbie Davidson. And again, you can say this is guilt by association, but I don't know anybody who would, I don't know. I don't know anybody who could look past this and just and minimize it, because every time I bring it up, people are shocked. But it's like some people want to ignore it. But yeah, there's just been, I guess it's guilt by association. But yeah, Skiba, Davidson, and Stallings were all doing videos together for years. And during the same time, Philip Stallings was creating some very bad stuff. I think he's in prison for 56 counts of exploitation of minors. So we're talking about stuff I don't even like talking about live because it's just horrible stuff. But the facts are these individuals are all part of the same small circle. And then you add on to that, you have other individuals who are on parole for the same stuff. And I'm like, what's with all the sex offenders in the truther communities, in these positions where they're specifically like goalies, they're gatekeepers. They keep things from going too far. They don't go beyond establishment paradigms. So I'm kind of thinking here, a lot of operatives are likely compromised individuals who are made useful to the system. They've made deals. Okay, let's continue here. Thrustazar says AJ is a de facto gatekeeper. And his followers may not be aware of it, but if they're parrots, then they too. If you're drinking the Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown, you're controlled opposition to me. If you're talking about false flags, you're controlled opposition. Even if you're not getting paid, even if you're not a paid propagandist running disinformation campaigns, you're a shill to me. In fact, in the age of, I guess, rage bait and clickbait monetization, you could call them shills now. If you're spending your time on X with a huge following, spreading alt media conspiracy fairy tales, you're pretty much a shill because you are getting paid to promote a bunch of BS. So the propaganda mules do get paid for it if they get enough clicks. And clicks matter far more than facts. It's clicks over facts every time. Okay, let's move on here. Donisau says, yes, compromised him. Well, I speak from experience. We had an individual who had represented this idea of, let's go ahead and challenge people's assumptions about NASA and the space program and the news. And so he was affiliated with our channel in the sense that we supported him. We helped him get to 1,000 subs and, kind of pushed his channel along so he could just do that full time. And he didn't tell us that he had a bad history and he was on parole. And had we known, we never would have let him represent us in any capacity. And then we see him getting interviewed by the Daily Beast, speaking at a Flat Earth conference. And I'm like, all these individuals are in the know. And if you hear about what he did, it's horrible. Although David Weiss excused it with the explanation that, well, she said she was 18. It's like, well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Behind the Perv is what we had this documentary called Behind the Perv, because as soon as the IPS called out what we saw as some very shady and sketchy characters being put in the front of this conversation, we were kind of outgrouped. And so we said, well, you're either behind IPS or you're behind the Perv, which is a play on Behind the Curve, obviously. P. Trippa says, I don't know if Joe Rogan's a shill, plausible, but he could be blissfully unaware. He's only a shill if he is aware of media fakery and is hiding it intentionally. But I see no indication that Joe Rogan has a clue. He seems visually illiterate. And when he does try to auto-hoax, he flops. He saw Sylvester Stallone lifting some weights and he said, oh, that's fake. It's like, yeah, Stallone was clowning with fake weights. He was acting like it was heavy. So it was like, he just gets it wrong. I don't think it would even make sense for most people with big media platforms to be in the know about high-level psyops and fakery. Their ignorance is insulation, and it protects them. This is all need-to-know basis stuff. Not to mention, the facts of what we're speaking of regarding media fakery, news bending, and how history is bent and how it's written day by day, this has tremendous implications for their worldview and the worldview that they uphold. And so Joe Rogan's part of the culture war, and many of their arguments and their positions are predicated on the literal existence of a lot of things that are just fake. I've heard him toy with the idea of nukes being fake, but they never really go deep into it. Like, what are the implications of this? How did the weapon of mass destruction that was suddenly put onto the world stage, how did it reshape geopolitics? How does it shape our interactions with other nations now that everybody could potentially destroy everybody, mutually assured destruction? It's like, it's a big deal. It's a paradigm shift. And no, they'll never go there. Joe knows man never landed on the moon. I've heard him make some decent arguments for how it could be faked and why it could be faked, but it always revolves around this Bart Sobral level guardrail where they might have faked it to trick the Russians, but they also faked it because they can't go past the Van Allen radiation belt with a manned craft. So they don't discount space travel or the space station or low Earth orbit or Starlink satellites, but they do discount Apollo 11 possibly. So it's a very limited hangout type of narrative. Doesn't go far enough. But as far as like being in the know, I don't think he is. I think a lot of these people are essentially clowns. They're clowns on the world stage, and I think that's fine. I think that's the best way. I mean, I don't think people with good conscience could continue to do their jobs if they were fully apprised of the fakery. And one of the points I make is that the masses are coexisting in the world of ignorance, just competing belief systems that are non-objective. It's all very subjective. There is no objectivity on the world stage. The programming class, existing at all levels of media, government, entertainment, they're at various levels of awareness. I call it a security clearance society. It's about security clearances, need to know basis for everything. And just because somebody's in on one particular psyop, let's say some type of exaggerated climate disaster involving fires, doesn't mean they know about fake school shootings or fake space. So it's interesting to try to determine how much in the know people are about the various aspects of media fakery. But I would argue that most of the programmers up the pyramid are only partially debriefed, only partially let in on the scope of it all. I mean, they're certainly part of the system. But the deprogrammed view, those of us who've stepped outside of the belief system box, who aren't part of the programming class, who aren't compartmentalized by necessity, we're privy to a lot more. I think it could be argued that even Elon Musk doesn't have the security clearance to know just how fake SpaceX is. He might actually believe it's real. He might be that much in the box. He could be like Truman in a Truman Show. But there's some interesting lines of speculation we could go through here, like celebrities. How many celebrities who are attached to these big psyops are aware? How aware are they? In fact, I was thinking about one, Pete Davidson. You know, Pete Davidson's dad died in the towers on 9/11. I think his dad was 33 at the time. And there was this interview a few years later, like years later. It's actually like 3 or 4 years ago, where Pete Davidson said that for years after 9/11, he was being visited by psychiatrists from some university. And they would ask him questions that he thought were weird. Specifically, do you really believe your dad is dead? And I saw this interview and I'm wondering, why would he be talking about this if he was in the know about the psyop that involves his own family members? And the way that he brought up these interrogations makes me think, okay, well, he wouldn't have brought those up if he was in the know. So he's like a Truman. He could literally be like a Truman in a Truman Show, which basically means you're a person who's surrounded by liars who gatekeep your worldview. You know, a good example of this would be the show Space Cadets. 10 episodes. It was a hoax. where you had astronauts think or wannabe astronauts believing they were in low Earth orbit. Well, how did they pull it off? Because you think it'd be easy just to, tap the wall or feel around and see if this thing's really in space. But what they did is they put 5 actors with the contestants. So you had 5 liars and 5 naive people. And the liars were able to conspire to keep the contestants from noticing anything or having any kind of meaningful dialogue about discrepancies. So what kept the illusion alive were the liars who insulated the dupes. And I think that a lot of these celebrities could be insulated. I would say Joe Rogan is insulated. Anybody who believes the mainstream media is insulated, especially if you're so gate-kept by it, where they say, don't listen to conspiracy theories, which is what they do. They impugn conspiracy theories for a reason. Kiddo, of course, is fake until proven otherwise. There is no other way. I used to say it's fake until proven real if it's an extraordinary claim that fits the pattern of previous fake events and has immediate political utility and is accompanied by crisis actors. Like I had stipulations. But now I say, because of deep fakery, yeah, it's fake until proven real. We have to elevate our standards of evidence. It's just called situational awareness. If you haven't done that, if you haven't had that paradigm shift, you will be submerged in the sea of irrelevance, and it matters. This visual illiteracy and the passive consumption of media constitutes a new illiteracy. It's disempowering, but people don't notice because everybody's gone illiterate in the same way. We're all in the same dark age in this sense. Let's Go says, hit the like button. Yeah, please do. Go ahead and share. YouTube's not messing with me, and they know it's because we're not quite done. I don't talk about it much, but gears are moving. The machine is moving. The process is advancing. Suing YouTube, Google has been a preoccupation of mine for some time. Various levels of success, and last time we really hit the nail on the head, but there's a venue switch I'm engaging in right now. Critterfest Sanctuary says, I heard Elon's not allowed in SpaceX alone, or he doesn't have private access to SpaceX computers. I'm not sure which. That's what I mean. He doesn't have the security clearance to go backstage, so he may not know. And when it comes down to it, when we say he, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the guy we see on camera, engaging in all these PR stunts? Or are we talking about the organization, the operation, rather, that is Elon Musk? Because Elon Musk has teams. Everything about him is a construct. He's a Frankenstein's monster. He's an amalgamation. He's Tony Stark, Gene Wilder, Henry Ford, Werner von Braun, Iron Man. He's a mashup of all these characters, and he's all of them and none, because he's a historic personage. He is a historic character like Trump, but the actual person there is just an actor fulfilling a role. And we know this because space is fake, among other things. And space fakery is a big deal. So he's not a clown. He's not a fool. Space fakery is I think it's the capstone level mind control operation, because it unites all of the world belief systems. So belief systems, specifically religions, the dominant belief systems, they all have their competing versions or visions of what happens after we die. What is paradise? What can they offer? Where can they take you? And the dominant paradigm, heaven, is space. The dominant religion that everybody's a part of, and they don't even know it, is Nasatology. And you're a Nasatologist if you believe in moon landings and space travel. You've accepted the belief systems. You've accepted its tenets without realizing it was a religious paradigm. Eric Akrish says, everybody supports him monetarily. Well, appreciate that very much. This is a think tank. It's not just about me. It's about platforming all of us who have reached certain conclusions and who have a certain perspective. And this does need to be enlarged. And we have ways to scale this up because it's intrinsically valuable. It's entertaining, it's edifying, it's fun, it's interesting, it's intriguing. This isn't like doom boofing. The sky's falling. This isn't political activism. We're not here to scare people into buying the cure for whatever we're hyping up. The next thing is going to be radiation first aid kits or something. Maybe some kind of EMP blockers for your personal devices. What's up, 2025 Cake Crash? Says happy to catch a live, support IPS for the win. If you go to ips.monster, you get archives, newsletters, and live stream notifications. And you can also support by joining there. And there's also other ways as well. One of the main things, though, is just sharing the content. We have to recognize that there is not a platform for the off-world stage perspective. All of the other media influencers, mainstream or alternative, and I say all of them, it's like literally all of them, operate on the basis that the world stage as presented is fundamentally real. And the problem with this is that all of their presuppositions then set as a, they form a pretext for the fake stuff that follows next. They're just consistently falling for psyop after psyop. And it's like mantras at this point. Like every time there's a mass shooting, the right-wingers all start chanting, it's because of antidepressants, SSRIs. So while they're going along with these orthodoxies, they're not even questioning the fundamental reality of what happened. So they're caught up in the psy war. So the only I guess you'd say conscientious objection, the only non-psy war participant position is off-world stage. And all alternative media influencers are part of the info war. They're part of the psy war. They're on the world stage. That is their perspective. Yeah, so Nasatology is kind of like Scientology, but they have better special effects. But they're both space religions. They're both scammy space religions. But Scientology has better actors. That's why I think it's notable that Tom Cruise is going to space, because then you'll have the fusion of Scientology and Nasatology. You know, on that note, it's interesting that Stanley Kubrick's daughter is a Scientologist. Vivian Kubrick. And she's a friend of Alex Jones. And she maintains that her father could not have faked Apollo 11 because if he did, it would have looked better. Which is clever, but it's not true. Mango says, your mind is the cure to disbelieve anything you've been told. Second, find your vice. Oh, your voice. Yes. Yeah, there is a cure for mind aids. And what is mind aids? Mind aids is when your mind does not have a mental immune system when it comes to mind viruses. You see it on TV and you just believe it. You didn't have a mental immune system response to that extraordinary claim. You just believe it. You just got infected with that mind virus. And that's why I say it's so important to have critical thinking in place, a mental immune system. Because you can be a passive recipient of a lot of ideas that aggregate into something. And the next thing you know, you're totally immersed in an alternate reality game as a true believer. And these things do have consequences, psychosomatically. We talked about drone sickness. Drone sickness in Jersey when people thought the drones had something to do with radioactive waste. People reported sickness from it. Videos glitching. Yes, I got to figure that out. That's something in the encoder, but we'll get it right. Lloyd Miller says, Peter Thiel has a major scandal. His husband suspected for murdering his model-kept man who fell or jumped from a high building. Yeah, Peter Thiel looks like he drinks blood. So that doesn't surprise me. Okay, video's glitching. Let me see if I can work on that. Audio's glitching. Let's see if we can fix it. Okay, hopefully it's fine. I'm looking here. It says dropped frames 2.5%. We'll just let it calm down for a moment. It's a work in progress, but we've made a lot of progress in the last month. Oh, you want to call in? Let me open up my phones. Agent standing by. 505 510 4226. I'm starting to refer to the clickbait truthers on X as digital crack dealers. I mean, it's that bad. It's just these little hits, these little bursts, and people are hooked. There is an addiction here. You should take note of. People do get addicted to doom scrolling. They get doom scrolling thumb. And I've heard. Have you heard of TechNeck? Okay, Infinite Plane Radio. Hey, what's up? Is this Leo
Hey,
Pirate?
yes, calling in just because a comment you made regarding Stanley Kubrick's daughter sparked me to want to call in because of her comment. What she said is kind of the exact same position that I used to have when I was really into questioning the moon landing many, many years ago, like more than a decade ago. I'd be like, huh, if Stanley Kubrick faked it, it would look way better because I'm a big fan of his films, love his movies and stuff. I'm like, there's no way he could allow it to look so shoddy. But, then Elon Musk's statement where he's like, it's, it's real because it looks so fake. And ever since I've seen that comment from Elon Musk, I've really thought about this. I've talked to you about it before, how I think on the world stage, there's been a deliberate separation of the top of the line digital effects for Hollywood and the practical effects for the world stage. And when Stanley Kubrick's daughter said, oh, there's no way he could have filmed it, it would have looked better. What if in a Stanley Kubrick film, someone was watching something like a bad TV show in one of his movies? Would Stanley Kubrick make that look as good as the rest of the movie? No, he'd probably make what's on the TV that the characters in the movie are watching. It's like pretty shoddy and cheap and bad looking, right? So of course he could have absolutely, done the moon landing in that sense.
Yeah, you know what? That's kind of funny. You bring up Musk too in this context because a few months ago he actually tweeted. He said regarding Polaris and these pictures of the Earth, he said, "Yeah, it looks like CGI, but it's not." And twice Musk has said it looks like CGI, but it's not. So he's admitting that we're right. It looks fake. He's just saying it's not fake. But fundamentally, he agrees with us. It does look fake. And I always question that. Why does it look fake? And what do you think about Tom Cruise making a movie on the space station? What happens if his version of space looks better than NASA's?
That's so incredible that you made that connection that Scientology is basically NASAtology, but with better actors. It's the mainstream religion, but in a more culty, cult of personality, Hollywood actors, e-readers kind of thing, right? But yeah, I think that is completely bizarre that the Scientologist Tom Cruise is going to space, making a film in space, right? I don't know. It's like the merging of the two, where now they can. I really don't know what to make of it, honestly. But you've been always pointing out in advance how they're going to handle his hair, how they're going to handle some. Is it going to look better than the ISS? Maybe it's the merging of the two, where now people can see effects as bad as they are on the ISS, and they can see advanced Hollywood effects, and both of them are. You see, once you go above a certain distance above the ground, now it can be anything. It's fair game. It's the sky stage, right? The star stage, where they can now put anything, realistic practical effects from CGI.
Well, I watched that really terrible movie called ISS that came out last year on January 19th about Russia and America nuking each other, and they're fighting on the ISS. And the way that they filmed that movie, it looked like they made it with NASA in mind. You only saw them in the way you see them on the ISS. And the way that they floated looked fake. Like they were actually making the floating in the movie ISS look faker than NASA's. They were dumbing it down on purpose. And they didn't have to. Because if you've seen stuff like from Inception with the work done by Christopher Nolan, no, they've perfected zero-G. They don't need wires. They don't need CGI. They use seesaws and counterweights. But they dumbed it down on purpose. And I think they also made it a point to have all the hair slicked down and ponytailed. They didn't want any loose hairs either, because that would also raise questions.
And I think the question of fakeability is fascinating to me because even in Inception, the famous like Hollywood no hallway dream sequence where he Joseph Gordon-Levitt was like running along the wall and then like fighting the dude. I showed you that Fred Astaire had done that in the 1950s in a musical number where he was dancing on the ceiling, where they had the entire shot, the entire scene on a rotating device where the camera was also rotating with the room, so it looks like it's uh, perfectly, ground normal, but the actor is running along the ceiling visually. It's recorded that way. So these effects have been around forever, and it goes off a book I've been reading recently from a professor of a Jesuit university. It was his dissertation where he was looking at Jesuit theater, and there have been practical effects for what almost 500 years now, 400 years now that we're still seeing being used on the world stage in our news outlets. I think I sent you a clip of it that it was like, was that?
Yes. Yeah, you actually, I was going to ask about this. So you're reading this book about Jesuit theater, and I saw some excerpt, and you said that, like, in the 1600s, they had perfected some type of garments so they could simulate somebody on fire.
Yes, some of the earliest stage pyrotechnics studies were done for the Jesuit theater. They had perfected a type of fire that basically didn't light clothes on fire. So it's like they had just incredible effects, and they had recreated the scene from the Bible where Jezebel falls out of her tower and she's eaten by alive by dogs. They had like dummies stuffed with like meat and blood while someone is screaming and they throw her off, and real dogs from the streets would like run in and eat her. And this is like the late 1600s and stuff, and this is in done on the stage and in the theater. And what's fascinating about it is in Europe there were over 500 Jesuit colleges producing at least two plays a year each, and yet there is no record of the scripts, the actual scripts for them. And the only record that this author, this Jesuit professor was writing about it, the only record they have of it is the letters that they wrote to their Jesuit generals in Rome, talking about the contest of ranking what were the best plays. They didn't write down the screenplays themselves. Very few of them are preserved. So these colleges, which involved actors that were both Protestant, Jesuits, rich, poor, all of them, they had a comment about the poorer individuals usually being better actors, which I thought was fascinating. But they had them all throughout Europe. Every year, at least 1,000 plays being done at these universities, and there's so little written records of the scripts that the actors themselves reproduced on stage.
That's incredible if you think about the power of this, because we're describing how today fake news is just essentially rumors and lies. But if you can fake it well enough to where people will spread it by hearsay, it's essentially real. It's like reality is what they can get away with, and they've been doing this for a very long time. So I make the point to say that media wasn't recently hijacked by the deep state, but media is just an extension of an older system of control through essentially psyops. I think that religion had more or less perfected it, but media is the newest iteration of religion in that sense. They can create
Yeah,
contemporary myths. Yep.
and that's the thing is there's another thing I forgot to mention, highlights. I have so many highlights I got to send you in the chat, but like they would have leading up to their performances were not limited to the stage. Leading up to it, they have a procession of like 1,700 townspeople, common people. They'd ask them who are not even a part of the college, hey, do you want to partake in this like parade as we waltz in? Here, carry one of our actors on this giant like, and they would have huge parades and stuff, and their the audiences, because it was for a college, were free. Anyone could watch, right? And there were like famous stories again. So it was like not just the plays themselves. We don't have the screenplays, but we have people writing about others fighting to get into the audience seats, and people forming riots outside because they were just addicted to these plays. And if you think about it, yeah, this kind of fakery has been around forever. But from an academic perspective, think of yellow journalism, right? For as long as the camera has existed, people have been faking things, what is shown in the frame. They would like reuse bodies, use dummies and stuff. Like they've always been doing this. The position that the IPS and you kind of put forth, it shouldn't be seen as controversial. But it's very academic. It's very media literate. It's just media studies is all it is.
I think we've had this false perception of objectivity from camera and video. Like we think of the camera as objective and the video, and it's never objective. It's always representing a bias, selectivity. There's always some intention there, whatever it is. It's not always objective, but the content itself is eminently fakeable, and it always has been. So when people are talking about the moon landing or any of these space events, they're talking about what NASA and the space agencies present to us as though it's objective scientific evidence, as though it's not manipulated media. And that's a false construct. I think we need to kind of break that apart, the idea that cameras are objective in any meaningful way.
And I think there's even a subtle narrative being put forth that now you need to be concerned because of the deep fake. Whoa, have you seen deep fake video technology, man? It's getting a little crazy. Again, it limits people's scope. So then they don't question older news events. They don't question the idea that a lot of the key events that are recorded in the history textbooks could very well have been subject to the same kind of deep fake. Sure, not with neural networks faking, say, faces or entire film segments, but it was always been edited down, crafted a certain way, spun a different way. And yeah, so it's like it's a paradigm that I think more people need to really consider for everything, not just what's happening right now, but also for the past.
Well, it's a big paradigm shock to consider this idea that someone like Elon Musk is quite literally just a reality TV star, and he's a pitchman for all types of bad ideas that become acceptable because of who he is. But that he's also running, I think, a campaign to destroy free speech. He's setting an example for why we can't have unfettered free speech, disease X, and then his affiliated satellites, which are there for spreading what? His memes and the clutter of low Earth orbit with Starlink. So I think Musk is a construct. And that's the main shift for me, is to recognize that we're looking at a puppet show. It's not an oversimplification, it's the truth. And it's the biggest conspiracy, and it's so big people can't see it. But that, yeah, this is monolithic
something
control.
I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something I was going to say, what I love about the think tank is that, you guys go beyond, of course you look for the hard evidence, say like the actors involved, the framing of certain things, how things could, the fakeability of it. I love that. That's great. But you also go into the implications of it. It's like, okay, so we know it's fake. Great. What were the thematic elements that went into it? Why is it faked? What is it working towards and stuff? And I find even like, people like Bart Sibrel and others, they're what's the word I'm looking for again? It was like limited hangout operations, where they're only concerned with one technical detail. Like I used to grow up and on TV, they would have moon landing fake documentaries, of course, juxtaposed with people giving the official narrative. But they'd be like, look at the way the lighting, look at the shadow that's cast here. And they're like, that's interesting. And then no one thinks about the implications. And if they do, it's like, it was just to fool Russia. That's it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we should take it further and say, well, if fake, then what? And if the moon landing was fake, they have it so limited to where Bart Sibrel says, well, China is blackmailing NASA over that. And they did fake it to trick the Russians, or they faked it because of the Van Allen radiation belt. But yeah, it's limited so that nobody says anything about what it means, the broader implications that all of the nations of the world are somewhat complicit in fakery. The ISS, what does it mean for the ISS? And I look at the space program as a house of cards. If it was fake at its foundational levels, it's all fake. It's built on fakery. It's not suddenly going to become real. And it's intellectually inconsistent to say, oh, the moon landing's fake, but the space station's real. Like, that's inconsistent. And I always point this out. There are individuals who are professional moon landing debunkers who assume the ISS is there. That's not consistent.
And I think a part of what comes from that inconsistency is where, again, they're hyper-focused on just the technical details, which is good. That's a good starting point. But when you start going into the history of cosmology, like the Jesuit influence in, cosmology in general, the Big Bang even coming from part of the research from a Jesuit professor, and some of the most important astrology research centers, or like even like the telescopes and stuff have connections to the Vatican. Things like that are planets named after Roman gods, right? That aspect, Nasatology, how it is a universal religion, whether you know it's a religion or not, they never get to that level. They never talk about that. They just keep it in a very, like you said, limited hangout thing where it's like just to fool the Russians. By the way, the ISS is real. Don't we have we have a secret space program. They faked it because they're actually going to other galaxies. They've already established warp speed. It's like Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's they.
Yeah, the secret space program. So instead of say like they think the secret is they're hiding more advanced craft. No, the secret is they're faking it all. That's the real secret. The secret space program is that it's really about programming worldview by creating a world stage that has all of its scarcity built into it. And it's about controlling the space between your ears. Always has been. And beyond that, though, there are elements here that suggest that it's syncretism, that Nasatology is actually a continuation of an older religious paradigm, and that the rockets named for sun gods and all these missions with these occultic names has very specific meaning. And I've really made that a big part of my focus at the beginning because it's there. And what it suggests to me is that behind all of the pageantry of the world religion is an esoteric side, that NASA does, in fact, fit the description of a mystery school. And I'm not saying that the astronauts who are faking it on stage are apprised of this, but I think behind it, that is ultimately who's pulling the strings. I think it's primarily a religious endeavor, and not about taking us to some distant paradise.
And the syncretism element is, and for full disclaimer for people listening to me, I'm not one of those like, oh, the Jesuits are responsible for everything. I'm not like that. I'm just studying one aspect of the world stage fakery. But in that book, what they talked about is Jesuit missionaries. They had them in India, in parts of Far East. Like it was incredible that the way when they established schools in different parts of the world and the plays that they put on at these colleges, they would incorporate the local populace's own myths into Jesuit ideology or Catholic theology. And the play they had talked about that they had when they canonized St. Ignatius of Loyola, they had a version of him where he was in the sea being carried by Poseidon, and Lucifer was being destroyed by Michael the archangel and stuff. And they combined, like syncretism, if you will, the elements of the provincial religions and myths, folk heroes, with their own Catholic ideology. And this is being done by like hundreds of years ago. Why would it not be done today in our modern day stage? The black the black monolith that we have in our living rooms, in our hands, all around us. We see the world stage being enacted, and it's enforced by the context. Context is everything. Because if you took the scenes out of our news and removed the live thing in the corner and the news ticker at the bottom, and so you'd think this looks like out of a really bad B movie. But once you put the live ticker, CNN and or maybe one of our talking heads, our favorite influencer, right? Now it's real. This is real. This happened. Oh my goodness, right?
I listened to one person, her name was Little Bo Peep. She had this YouTube channel, and she insisted that the little news tickers and the rotating graphics, that all these things were effective for hypnotic inductions for a certain percentage of the population. And that sports games, you have the countdown clocks, that she suggested that a lot of our media is using literal hypnosis to make us hyper-suggestible.
Oh, yeah. And if you mention hypnosis or mesmerism, I actually did a pretty deep dive into Franz Anton Mesmer. This is where we get the term mesmerism from. He started, animal magnetism, which would then become modern hypnosis and so forth. He was educated by a Jesuit priest as well. It never ends. Like the connections to the Jesuit schools in Europe, you'll always find it if you know where to look for it. But again, I'm not asserting that they're the ones who control everything. The way I see it, I think I've explained to you this model before. I almost see like the Jesuits as like the directors and the Masons as like the stagehands, like our architecture and our buildings and the locations where these faked events occur. have stage significance, like the latitude, longitude locations, the building names and stuff, which were, laid out by Masons. And the screenplay writers themselves could be a variety of different organizations, but ultimately within all of them, there is an inner mystery school religion that has been continued since antiquity, since so long ago, right?
I get that idea too. Like, I do not think that the people in control of the PSYOP entertainment complex built it. I think they inherited it. And I don't know how it's passed down. I use the term security clearance society because it incorporates now media, government, corporations. So we're not just talking about traditional ideas of secret clubs with funny handshakes. So we're not talking about Masons or Jesuits, the Rotary clubs. It's really much more nuanced than that. But the structure is the same. We're talking about hierarchies of control, need to know basis, and basically intelligence.
It would be akin to looking at the production studio of a movie and saying they're responsible for everything. It's like, no, there's so many components that go into the making of a film, not just the stagehands, not just the writer, not the director. It's like who really is choosing even the creation of these films, like the timing of these films. You talked about Flight Risk earlier, releasing right around the time we had the DC and Pennsylvania plane crashes. It's like, well, that didn't happen overnight. That took a while to produce that film, right? Flight Risk,
Yes.
by Mel Gibson, directed by Mel Gibson, right?
Yes. So the timing of the releases. So as I
Who
said,
decided that?
the timing of the release of the Captain America coincided with Trump getting shot, and that was the context of the trailer itself, the president being shot at in a theater. Now it's premiering in Liberty Theater in Washington, and in a theater the ceiling collapses, and the president in that movie, and I have to go watch it. Maybe I'll go watch it tomorrow and I'll review it. He becomes the Red Hulk, an obvious allusion to MAGA, and his opponent is Sidewinder, played by the same actor, Giancarlo Esposito, who played the mayor in Megalopolis. So he's an actor who's always representing the opposition to the actor representing Trump, consistently. And he's been associated with Obama. So that's another aspect to this, is that what we see happening on the news has usually at the same time, it has an entertainment version of the same thing happening. And the timing is what gives it away. Just the precise timing of the release of a movie as it corresponds to what's happening on the world stage. Great example of this is Trump kicked off his presidential campaign in Waco just as Netflix releases Waco American Apocalypse. Like, these are coincidences if you're only looking at it as an isolated thing. But if you consider the implications, for all these events to coincide, it means these are planned years in advance, at a minimum.
Yeah, and it's like, what is the release dates, how they have significance? What is the calendar system they use? The papal Gregorian calendar system, which, has been around for a while, and it's a part of the world stage. So in the same way we identify these actors having personas that span across their filmography, where they subconsciously represent things happening on the world stage, it's like the release date on the papal Gregorian calendar is also a part of the world stage. And if you don't know about the scope or size of the world stage, it looks kind of, crazy. It's like you're pointing out these release dates, you're pointing out these, yeah, because we see the boundaries of the world stage. It's not just in theaters. It's not just in these production studios. It's on a grand scale across multiple modalities and different consumer production sources. And it's so crazy you bring that up, because recently I was going through Alan Moore's the V for Vendetta. So I watched the film the day before yesterday. Horrible movie, but I was like shocked how shockingly bad it was, and yet it was super popular. The Guy Fawkes mask is it's synonymous with the online movement, anonymous, right? Oh, we are Legion with the Guy Fawkes mask. So I decided to watch it. Oh, really? I was surprised how I really didn't like it. But the Guy Fawkes, it's the part of the Jesuit gunpowder plot, where there was that, the thing to destroy Parliament, which there's also people who think that's fake. But, I was looking at it, movie was really bad, and I found out that the comics had come out in the 80s. The film came out in 2006. And I had a friend tell me, no, the graphic novel is way better, way better. So I decided to go through it, and there are significant changes between the graphic novel and the Matrix writers, the reproduction in 2006. The comic has a sentient AI called Fate that all the news agencies and the priests, the state religion, their sermons are dictated by an AI called Fate. The news agency, their news are dictated by an AI. And this is in the comic, but it was expunged or removed from the movie. And if you watch the movie, it's a very Bush era, post 9/11, Christianity, Christian fascism. They're locking up gay people. It was just really lame. But that's not what the original comic was like. So it's as if when it gets to Hollywood, they repurpose old works for the current cultural zeitgeist, for the current world stage narrative.
Okay, interesting. Because Fate, AI in control of all news media narratives, kind of like in Newsbenders, there's an AI behind the construction of the fake news paradigm that everybody adheres to. And it's kind of a placeholder for the ultimate author. And I describe the monolithic media control as a new monotheism, as far as it being the dominant paradigm, Nastology. It's a one God construct. Ultimately, it's monolithic. But the idea of AI or some kind of higher intelligence being the ultimate author kind of correlates with the idea of God being the author and the singular authoritative voice on everything. And they're building up this notion, I think, in our heads that it would even be better if we were to hand over power to Hell 9000. But it's such a consistent theme. And the movie V for Vendetta has some significance, I think, for 2020. A little bit of foreshadowing here and there, but I do remember thinking it might have been bad. But the author, Alan Moore. Alan Moore is a huge metascripter, and he was into Aleister Crowley at the age of 12. And he frequently talks about magic and how speaking and how words are, in fact, part of the concept of exercising magic in practice, that spellcraft is really a matter of how, I guess, words and ideas shape our perceptions, etc. But he really gets into this idea that storytelling and narratives is part of the process of reality bending. So Alan Moore is kind of I think he's a deep insider to the esoteric aspects of media mind control.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And he has a master class, which I had downloaded a long time ago. He has really good writing tips, excellent writing tips and stuff. He always talks about word etymologies for everything and dramaturgy. Like when you're creating a story, go deep into the location, the art, the architecture, the important landmarks of the place, incorporate it all into your story. And oh yeah, the other thing I forgot to tell you about V for Vendetta is the radio at the beginning in the first couple of pages is blaring propaganda, and one of the things it says is "Make Britain Great Again," and that came out in the late '80s. And then in the film, the 2006 film, they don't have that. They don't have that.
Interesting how these things are repurposed, because we were talking about the correlation between characters in media and real life. So you got Trump and the Obama being represented in multiple movies having the same dynamics in place. Well, there's that movie called A Man in Fool, where Charlie Croker is based on Trump and the mayor who's based on Obama orchestrates his downfall. Well, that's based on a Tom Wolfe novel from like 1998 or something. So you're looking at a Netflix movie that came out last year that is about contemporary events and even foreshadowed some stuff having to do with Barron and Melania and Ivanka and Trump. But there's no way that could have been part of Tom Wolfe's novel or vision. So they can take something and then, repurpose it for very specific world stage characters. And this has been a consistent theme I've been noticing. And Netflix is really one of the best places to look if you want to see how government has co-opted all entertainment for the purposes of aligning us with future and current fake news.
And I think it's important for people to realize that like our meta scripters are neither liberal nor conservative, and so they're only concerned in keeping people fighting. Like war is peace, quite literally for them. That's the mind war perspective from Michael Aquino. It's they repurpose older stories. They take older novels, like you had described, and then syncretize them or repurpose them for the current world stage magic trick they're performing. And it is magic, like Alan Moore described, because if you have people, I don't know, if you had like a group of people with a glass of water in the middle and they told it cyanide is in it, don't get near it, and I walk up and I drink it knowing there's nothing in it, everyone will be like, wow, what a miracle worker. He's because they had been told that that was a dangerous drink. But if it's not actually, and someone does it, everyone's like, oh, wow, amazed. So the magic really is in these narratives and these stories, which everyone knows that they're fictional, but it expands their frame of reference for when on the news they see something similar to it, except now it's real because it's in the news. It's not a Netflix show. Now it's real.
Yeah, when Trump was fake shot, a lot of people are like, "Oh, we expected this to happen," because there was buzz. There's everybody out there in alt media was talking about how Trump's going to get it. If this happens, this will happen. So it was being hyped up to a fever pitch, and then it happened. And I think by creating that fever pitch and all the predictive programming, and I pointed out a dozen solid examples of concurrent real-time correlation between entertainment media and the Trump shooting. It makes it seem like it was the natural outcome. It reduces the amount of friction and cognitive dissonance. They're sowing the seeds, and it works. This is all perception management, propaganda. Edward Bernays wrote about this, and this is what Michael Aquino wrote about as well, as you said, the mind war. And the mind war does take that 1984 notion of war as peace, because the perpetual war is what pretty much keeps everybody locked down into this alternate reality game. And that's what it ultimately is. It's a big game, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I think that you've described it best, that the meta-scripters do it in advance in broad strokes. So they write out history in broad strokes way in advance, and then as they near these moments, then they tailor past works for the cultural zeitgeist, and they get nearer. And then right around it, they have concurrent programming, like trailers with Harrison Ford getting shot right before Trump then on the world stage is shot and it misses and it nicks his ear and stuff. And it's crystallized. Then you have all of your InfoWars talking heads and your social media influencers giving their hot takes about it. And the idea of it being fake is never discussed.
Nope.
It's just
InfoWars
reality.
Talked about second shooters. They said it was the deep state, it was DEI, it was second shooters. So they come out here with all these guardrailed explanations, and they don't even question the veracity of the event itself. And what's unique about this Trump shooting event is that here is a psyop where you cannot claim that Trump is a Truman in a Truman Show. You cannot call him a dupe. You cannot give him plausible deniability. Trump is a master magician on the world stage, and he fooled everybody. So there goes his plausible deniability. He's an insider.
Didn't Marina Abramovic describe Trump as a magician? An expert magician.
She said he was a great magician, and she's right. What he did, and I've thought this for a long time, but yeah, he performed an act of theater, stagecraft, magic, and look what it did. And so when we say magic, we mean illusion, even sleight of hand, but also manipulation, all forms of manipulation. You could just, anything that hijacks control of reality, you could broadly describe as magic. And there are different levels of magic, but most media manipulation and propaganda and subtle influence and perception management would be considered lesser magic. Greater magic would be the more esoteric stuff where they're exciting people's emotions and throwing weird symbols in their faces and we can't figure out why. That's where it gets into the more esoteric side. But broadly speaking, media and magic are inseparable. The world stage is a magic show.
Yeah, the thing about him, if you think of a magic show, a magician will have audience plants. They'll put up posters beforehand. I really think the magic show is an excellent analogy for people to consider because, with Trump after that event, wasn't there a rally where a bunch of people wore the same Band-Aid that he had on his ear? So it's like you saw it in the Butler PA rally, and you see it around you.
It is at RNC. Everybody's wearing it on their right ear, and he comes out with a big pad on his ear. That was his dramatic reappearance, and they had him come out with the name Trump behind him, looking like the Elvis comeback special. I mean, great theater, but that's really what it is. And for people who are on Team Trump and they're pro MAGA, they're in the mind war. They can't accept that their own side lies to them. So they think the left lies, the deep state lies. Biden's just a guy in a mask, but Trump is real. Trump was a real threat to the system. It's like, come on, it doesn't work that way.
And near the end of his first term, when the 19 crown thing happened, he was talking about how there's this great spell that came over the nation. And if you didn't consume any social media, if you didn't look at your screen at all, if you just spend your time outside jogging, maybe drawing or talking with friends, you would have no idea. But then when you go to the supermarket, you see everyone wearing masks. I remember I didn't even know or care about anything until I went to the market one time and I saw this elderly gentleman wearing like gloves and a mask, and I was like, what is going on? So you see something on your screen, and then it comes off the screen and is now around you, right? So it's definitely real, right? It came off the screen, and now you see everyone wearing masks, so it's definitely real.
Yeah, that was fascinating there as well. How they used fashion and to spread a lot of the ideas, where it's all just nonverbal, and you're getting all these nonverbal cues from people. But how immersive it became. It became an immersive illusion. And one of the things about that space cadets I alluded to, they had psychologists analyzing how these people were tricked. And they said there comes a point where going along to get along is psychologically rewarding and less painful, less cognitive dissonance than fighting every step of the way. And there's a point where people just go along with it, even if they don't really believe it. And it doesn't even matter after a point because the system just moves on with or without your consent. And so the immersive illusion of 2020 was completely the result of expert theater and propaganda and social conditioning and peer pressure. But yeah, it was expertly performed, and there was no escape.
I have this feeling where it's like the farther something is in the past, it's harder, right? Because it's been accepted. It's all like the longer a lie is believed, the harder it is to attack, because it just is. Like it just happened. Everyone did stuff about it. What are you to say that it was completely faked and stuff? And that's where the trouble gets in. It's like the lies perpetuate themselves by other people playing along to get along. And the narratives, again, going back to the different fake narratives that are used to bifurcate it from a political perspective. I recognized from 713 the anti-DEI narrative when one of the female Secret Service agents, she was like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And she was like acting ridiculous and like flopping over and having no idea what to do. And I was thinking, of course, the InfoWars people were saying, oh, look at this. DEI has even entered the Secret Service, or, oh, the deep state gave Trump bad Secret Service agents and stuff. Meanwhile, I'm saying this plays off an existing narrative that already exists in the more conspiratorial, right-wing minded audience. So they'll never question that it was fake because it fits already into a pre-established narrative that, oh no, DEI is destroying everything. And
Yes.
We saw recently with the planes, there was, I think, some TikTok videos or something of all-female pilots bragging about how they're pilots, and then that was one of the flights that landed upside down or something like that, right? So then no one questions about whether or not the event was fake. They question whether or not DEI should be allowed to be influencing all of our industries.
Exactly. They even brought up DEI with the California fires, and they were showing they were playing up the same narratives. And whenever you see these bifurcations where right wing has one interpretation, left has the other, you can be assured it's fake, because if they can get you talking about these political football issues, then your assumption is the thing was fake and we're reacting to it. I call it fake. Or it's like that old trick of, if you're a car salesman, if you get some couple debating over the color of the car they're going to get, they've already bought the car, even if they haven't signed any papers. And so they've already sold the story if they have you fighting over the details, over why it happened, instead of did it even happen. It's the same thing. It's gun culture or SSRIs, DEI, deep state, and you can just see how it leads people along predictable lines. And I saw that as well. And I'm like, this means a few things. It means that they're playing a game with the public. They know a certain segment of the population is going to interpret it this way. So they choreographed it that way. That means that those Secret Service agents were acting like incompetent workers who shouldn't have been there. So they were actually playing into the right-wing misinterpretation of what DEI is. DEI doesn't mean lower standards. It's not what it means. But that's what the right thinks, and they played into it. So I'm just saying that this is a game, and they're playing people expertly. And it's intriguing to watch. But if you recognize their frameworks in advance, you just don't fall for it. And you can just watch everybody else, like lockstep lemmings, just go along with it.
Yeah, if you know the bifurcation and the narratives that exist on both sides, then you're able to immediately identify. So the left thinks this is coming from government cuts, the right thinks it's DEI. And how far, it's not just the talking heads, the social influencers are doing it, it's even in memes. People don't know this, but right around the time of 7/13, there was this very obnoxious meme of these women dancing in an office calling Gen Z boss in a mini, and it would like, people made shorts of it, memes of it, and said like, it's like when your female HR person fires people and stuff. They do it in such a subtle way where DEI doesn't even appear, but the sentiment is still spread everywhere. And it like, kind of like these weather psyops, they take things that are like, maybe, real or exist and magnify it, make it worse and play off of it. And then like get you to accept whatever appears on the world stage as real. So they do it in films, they do it in memes, they do it in talking heads, they do it everywhere. You're attacked from every single angle.
Yeah, it's an easily recognizable MO, and it's a framework, and we shouldn't be able to predict things, but we're consistently predicting things like, oh, this is going to be blamed on the right on this and the left on this, and it's so consistent. It's like, is this parody? Is it comedy? And it's formulaic, but it's 100% discernible as a pattern. And if it's a pattern and if it fits a template, then you don't need to assume it's real. You can go with it's fake until proven real because it's obviously a templated propaganda operation. And we've been observing these long enough that we're pretty confident in how accurate our assessments are. And we haven't been debunked about any of our major claims, any of our statements of informed disbelief. Nobody's come around to correct us on anything because their only basis for correcting us would be the lies as televised, sans the additional information that we have.
Well, and I was going to say, we cannot undercut how right you've been about, like, what is it, the CEO shooter with the connection with the madness, Luigi Mangione. The connection to the madness and Luigi Mangione, all the way back in December, you were like, okay, this is going to lead to some kind of left uprising where, like Joker, they're going to try and, the sentiment that was expressed in Joker 2, where he was in prison, there are all the fans outside the theater waiting for him. So you called that all the way back in December. But because, unlike the gematria type people who give like a specific date, like at this time and this, right, you give this in general narrative-based, long-term cultural zeitgeist views that are fulfilled over the coming months, right? But and that's why people, don't go back and look at streams you had done weeks ago or months ago to look into it. And I had been saying the same thing. I mean, day one, when I saw the bullet shells had writings on it, his manifesto was partially written on bullet shells as a puzzle. And I was like, what is he, the Riddler?
Yes.
Like, leaving like calling cards and stuff. I was like, this is ridiculous.
And then
I called that out all the way back then. And
Dave Franco, who played the Riddler, was compared to Luigi, and he said he's been getting nonstop offers to play Luigi. So you have this direct Riddler connection, in addition to other Riddler connections, to Luigi's little manifesto.
Yeah, and of course, we have a saying here at Leo's Late Night Friends, when someone does this terrible, terrible crime, you go, well, why would they do that? Don't worry. Show me the manifesto. Every time. You don't need to think. No thinking. We got exactly why he did it. It was written. You can read that there. You can read in a spiral notebook. You can read it right there. It's up online, right? And every single time they do that, it's another prop. A manifesto should be considered like another prop in the show. It goes beyond the screen now. Now it's scans of a document. And I noticed this with Audrey Hill because, I am Christian. People are shocked when they're like, oh, you're saying all these things are fake. So what are you saying? Like even Audrey Hill shooting up a Christian school, are you saying that's fake? I'm like, yeah, of course. The manifesto that was put forth, I hate Christians. I'm oh gosh, and I was like, this is just to galvanize the most low information Christians who get afraid of Satanists like drinking blood in the streets and stuff. Just ugh, ugh.
Well, that's yeah. They've actually, you talk about how they recycle things and they tailor it to cultural templates, and they've brought back the Satanic Panic, and this is what interests me. The Satanic Panic came back as Pizzagate, but one of the faces of the new Satanic Panic was Audrey Hale, and her manifesto, and she shot up the Christian school, and it was hyped up as something of a satanic attack. And this is around the time that Target had a trans designer of clothes making rainbow clothes targeting youth or something, and it created this bigger panic. So these things are all connected. But Audrey Hale happens to physically resemble the main character in Stranger Things, which is kind of a pattern. Stranger Things has a lot of characters that correlate to mass shooters. Like Robert Crimo, who was just charged today, I think, comes out of Stranger Things. But the resemblance there is highly significant because these characters are in a Stranger Things takes place during the Satanic Panic, and they're in a little club called the Hellfire Club, and so there's this correlation between the Satanic Panic in this movie set in the 80s, its main characters, the new Satanic Panic, and the new shooter. And there's other dynamics involved as well with these actors and their political leanings and how it relates to the right-wing culture war. But yeah, this is a thing that's ongoing at all times. And so they're repackaging things and they're selling it to like truther Christians are given a certain version of eschatology. And we've seen these manufactured villains all the time. You know, the Bill Gateses, the Klaus Schwabs. These are all archetypes, and they're like made for TV villains.
And it's amazing you bring that up because like the Satanic Panic aligning with Audrey Hale's event. Fakeologist and I had done an interview, which is the featured video on my channel. It's just youtube.com/LeoPirate. Back in, I noticed that this is June 2023, Pride Month, right? It was the first time in several years where there was not a super pro-positive Pride sentiment. Instead, there was a Bud Light controversy. We're like, oh, they're putting trans people on our Bud Lights. And then there was the Target is now selling these things to our children. And immediately, Tim, I was like, all right, we're switching the other way. I called it all the way back then. And I talked about that to Ab and Fakeologist. I was like, this is where they're going. They manufacture fake consent. They tell everyone, look, everyone loves gay rights. But then they flip the switch and they say, now everyone's starting to see how ridiculous gay rights is and stuff. It's so easy to get swept up in the current zeitgeist, the current narrative. And you said it before, trans shooters are like the new bowl cut shooters.
Oh, yes.
They constantly switch it on you.
Well, so the shooter thing was the right wing had its vested interest in the Second Amendment, and so they downplayed the significance of mass shootings. They said, oh, it's caused by SSRIs, antidepressants, not the guns. So they're trying to protect their guns, so they're going with this other narrative. But they couldn't be made to care about the mass shooters. And the mass shooters are always coming out to be Nazis, right-wing, racist, shooting minorities, shooting because they had some right-wing ideology against immigrants. So you have this like just nonstop onslaught of right-wing leaning shooters. And then all of a sudden with Audrey Hale, because I started saying, when are we going to have our first female mass shooter? So we were kind of waiting on this because I said, if we're all exposed to the same propaganda or the same SSRIs, the same gun culture, we should expect there to be an equal number of shooters, equally represented, male, female, shouldn't be only male white kids. And all of a sudden, we start getting more diverse shooters. Audrey Hale was the first of it, but the reason why right-wingers cared is now suddenly it's a left-wing shooter radicalized on Reddit, and it's a left-wing shooter with a manifesto that's against Christian right-wing values, and it's pro-LGBT. So now you have a manufactured villain that scares the right. Now they suddenly care, whereas before they didn't. And so I kind of point out the Covenant church shooting was like a right-wing Sandy Hook, and the left-wing downplayed it and didn't care about it, and the right-wing cares about it. So it's kind of interesting how they selectively care about the victims depending on who the shooter was. And Audrey Hale represented a major plot twist on the world stage.
I call it "it's only fake if I don't like it" syndrome, which is quite prevalent amongst people who don't see the forest of fakery and just focus on the individual trees. They like to pick out the event that they don't like and say that it's fake, whereas they don't see the mind war entertainment, the Psy war entertainment complex. They don't see the whole scale of the entire world stage. And it's curious because once you know that these events are fake, you can start looking for the implications and narratives that are being milked out of it. And yeah, it's like, oh, Reddit is the breeding ground. Reddit, Blue Sky, that's like the left wing. Oh, that's where they're getting radicalized. The right wing is getting radicalized on Twitter. And in the madness, this is crazy. The episode where the main character is given the tour of the anarchist compound, where they use 3D printed guns to shoot up, to practice their shooting, that like, what do you call it, Antifa and meth. That episode is the third episode. The episode name is called Discord.
Oh, that's
and
right.
There was I forgot.
That's good. That's good. The episode is called Discord.
Yeah. Yeah, the episode's called Discord. And then there was a shooting, I think, earlier last year. Was it I forgot where it was. I don't want to say locations. I forgot. But there was a shooter that was, I guess, didn't stay in the news very long, but it was also fake. They said the narrative they were going with is that they were radicalized using Discord. They were posting on Discord. So it's like these shooters are almost tied to particular web platforms. That's what causes people, right? If you use too much Reddit, too much Discord, you're just gonna go and shoot someone, right? Like, of course. Duh.
Well, what they started doing is they started correlating the idea of mind viruses with mass shootings. And so after 9/11, the conversation was about, we got to infiltrate the radical mosques where the radical Quran verses are getting people to go do bad things. And they're connected to other radicals here. So it was all about mind viruses being transmitted in these closed little networks, these little echo chambers. And so what they did is they kind of created a parallel to the radical mosque with the radical servers. And so I talk about how Al-Qaeda means the base. Right-wing nationalists is a group called the base. But we were talking about this correlation between the terrorists and how we have the domestic version of radical Islam in this whole, what do you want to call it? MAGA ban, vanilla ISIS. It's all manufactured, but they've replaced the radicalizing agent from the Quran verses to QAnon verses. And you can see this direct parallel. I think the whole MAGA ban concept is a government designed op to get the public to agree that we need to do something about domestic terrorists. And it's the same way they manufactured the radical Islamic parody they used to terrorize us for decades. But yeah, there's a templating here.
And it's based off this idea that the real problem are the mind viruses, the source, the media that people consume. If we just change that, or like, let's take down these platforms. I remember during the Christchurch shooting, with a manifesto, where shout outs to PewDiePie, right? He live streamed this a pre-recorded video, of course, of the event on Facebook Live. But you know what got shut down? 8chan did. And the guy who runs 8chan, he's a Freemason. I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, he gave it over to Congress, right? I'm like, that's interesting. Why wasn't Facebook shut down? That's the platform that he live streamed on, right? Oh no, but he was radicalized on 8chan. So you can just create these vectors, like, these predetermined vectors where people are receiving the mind viruses and shut them down. And you have called out so long ago, that X and Elon Musk is definitely going to play that role in the coming events.
Yeah, Disease X, and they brought this up. They even called it a Twitter bubble. But no, they built up this concept of the mind virus. The public accepts it. Once they believe in it, now they're going to agree that we all have to have the online equivalent of a lockdown to purify the environment for our mental scape. And the idea of the healthy super spreader being the big threat is now paralleled with the trafficker or carrier of misinformation. So maybe I'm not sick from this information, but somebody who's mentally ill hears what I'm saying and they go do something. It's the same thing. It's saying the mentally immune compromised can be harmed and will spread further harm that originates with people who may not be symptomatic. So I'm an asymptomatic mind virus super spreader. So I'm not an extremist, but I might incite
Asympt-
somebody. Yep.
I still forgot about that stupidity or asymptomatic. Oh, you're healthy. Oh, you're not sick. That means you're even more dangerous
Exactly.
because you don't even know that you're
I-
sharing people.
I'm a hot skull. There's that show, I think it was filmed in Turkey. It's called Hot Skull. And it's about a mind virus lockdown. Everybody has to wear earplugs so they can't hear people who are speaking and spreading the mind viruses. And the main character is harboring all these mind viruses, but he's not getting sick from it. So he's like this dangerous super spreader, and they call him the Hot Skull. But that's pretty much us. We're hot skulls.
And so we might see something like, because again, the term asymptomatic, it sounds pretty sophisticated and scientific. I want to see what's going to be the more, I don't know, learned or like information age way of demonizing auto hoaxers. Auto hoaxers just sounds kind of, I don't know what they'll call them. You know what I mean? Conspiracy theorists, that's on the way out. Conspiracist might be something going up, but I don't know what they're going to do. They have to come up with some kind of term to make people afraid of those who say, "Oh yeah, what's on your? Stop treating your screens like your eyes. It's not an extension of your sensory modalities. Like it can be fake. Oh my gosh, these people are dangerous." I don't know how they'll do it, but
The best they can do so far, they can mock us. They can claim that we say birds aren't real. The best they can do is mockery. I haven't really seen any effective refutation to anything, and I don't think they want the confrontation. But we'll bring it eventually. Anyway, hey, thank you very much for the call. And if you want to plug your page again for anyone who hasn't seen it, I'm going to include some of your articles in the next issue of The Insider. It's a mindwar.page.
Yes, mindwar.page. And as always, thanks, Tim. So later.
All right, thanks for the call. All right, everyone, that is Leo Pirate. Lots of interesting information. And yeah, he's reading some book about Jesuit theater. And I've been going through some of it. I'll probably go through more of it tomorrow, some of the screen caps, because what he was showing here is, and I might even have some of it here, examples of how far back stagecraft has been used effectively to create illusions in real time. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, again, tomorrow's 3/4, and Trump says tomorrow night will be big. I will tell it like it is. So we'll get to that tomorrow. I also have a lot of comments I want to go through. March 4th, March Against Tyranny. So 50 states, 50 protests, 1 movement. So that's coming. Tomorrow's the anniversary of the Boston bomber Joker Sarnoff having his death penalty reinstated the same day Batman came out. So, I mean, very portentous. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but it should be interesting. And we'll be here live tomorrow, likely 6 p.m. And I'll send out, in fact, I want to know the title of the book. Let me see if I can pull that up really quick. Someone's asking. I'll send out archives here tonight. And I plan on live streaming a painting of Luigi Mangione. And I'm going to give 20% of the auction proceeds to his commissary. And yes, I'm sort of exploiting the situation, but I can do it because I don't believe it's real. It's called the Jesuit Theater, I think. The Jesuit Theater. I may also add even Jaded Hollywood, where it is to read the history of Jesuit drama might sometimes be startled to find more than 2 centuries ago striking anticipations of feats that are done in the cinema. For example, 1640, actor dives in the battlements of a castle from the roof. Jezebel plunges from her window, done by a dummy stuffed with meat and blood and bones, and the dogs in the street attack with unfeigned realism. That's pretty good. That's rather good. But I think it's called the Jesuit Theater. Okay, we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. I have some errands to run. So thanks again for the comments. I think we had almost 200 people in here tonight. More than 200 if we count the audio. And if you want the archives, live stream notifications, and newsletters, go to ips.monster and sign up tonight. And also, I will release the pilot for the next season of South Pole. So get on the newsletter.